So we are here today with Dr. Fred Alsop again, who's going to give us a little bit more information about the Tweetsie Railroad. And would you mind just explaining briefly about how Tweetsie got its name?
I'll be happy to, Rachel. It's good to see you and the crew back again. Thanks for coming. Tweetsie actually refers to the sound that the whistles made on these small steam locomotives. And story goes that one of the girls' schools that was along the route in North Carolina gave it that name. They'd hear this little whistle blowing down in the valley, and sometimes they would run out to see the train and wave at the engineer and the conductor as they went by. And so the East Tennessee and Western North Carolina, which is the railroad, sort of a mouthful, became affectionately known as the Tweetsie. And it's from the sound of the whistle.
Okay, excellent. And it looks like we are here in the Hampton section of the Tweetsie right now. What exactly can you tell us? I see we've got a data book right here. What's the purpose of this?
Well, the Tweetsie Railroad also has an East Tennessee and Western North Carolina Historical Society, as a lot of railroads do that are what are called the falling flags. They're no longer in existence, but they had a rich history and a rich tradition. So part of what we're trying to do is take information that was assembled by this historical society and other writers and incorporate it into this railroad, because part of it is make-believe. Any railroad is going to be, and we're trying to put 33 miles of railroad inside 1,300 square feet. But for those people who really have a strong tradition of what the Tweetsie was and what it meant to them, we want to make this as realistic as we possibly can in miniature. So we've got lots of data books. We're going to copy the town settings as best we can in miniature. All the bridges will be the right length and the right shape and the right structures, and the tunnels will be as well. So we're following these books just as if it were our Tweetsie Bible as we begin to try to construct this railroad.
Great. And would you mind taking a look with us of a couple of the pages of this book?
Oh, happy to. I'll show you, since we're in the Hampton section right here. This is the East Tennessee and Western North Carolina Railroad on the Laurel Fork, which was the southern railway that came in as far as Hampton. And an interesting thing to us about the Tweetsie, it's a narrow gauge railroad. We've talked about that. But it's fairly flat from Johnson City to Hampton. So they were able to lay dual gauge track, which meant you had narrow gauge, but also an extra rail that would make it standard gauge, 4 feet 8.5 inches. And they could pull standard gauge cars between Johnson City and Hampton. The first tunnel, the one we're standing at, was big enough to let big cars go through. All the others were cut for the smaller locomotives and cars as they went up through the gorge. So this is Hampton. We can see where the Doe River runs in, and we'll be able to model sections of this and keep the river in the right place, the town in the right place, and any turnout, like this little siding right here, should be the Hampton siding, and that's where the depot will be, and part of the town will be here as well.
Okay, so earlier on you mentioned the Hampton Covered Bridge. We talked about that. You'd shown us this picture right here. What specifically can you tell us about this bridge?
Well, this is a neat little bridge. It's about 124 feet long. It's set down in the valley of Hampton, and it was the only covered bridge on the line. Lots of early railroads did covered bridges, but they weren't too popular because you go through with all that smoke billowing around and the crew comes out coughing. But they have this nice covered bridge called the Hampton Bridge, and that's going to be this little area that you see right here. So we've got narrow gauge track all the way across, but you'll notice that the little plastic eyes change in size. These are much longer, they're narrower, and they're much closer together than the ones on the regular road bed. And it's what is called bridge track. And because it's got a wider base, it makes a much more even distribution of the weight of the locomotive and the train as it goes across. So it makes it more load-bearing. These are put down on terra firma. This one's being carried on a wooden structure or a steel structure. And we looked at this little picture before. This was an end view. You're looking through the bridge itself. When you see this, just as if you were in the locomotive and about to enter the bridge. And it'll be painted the nice shade of green that they had, and it'll have the nice red roof that it had.
Is it ever challenging for you guys to be able to keep the train on track from one set to another?
In model railroading, just like in the prototype, that's always the challenge. you don't want the train on the ground. You want it on the rails. And we have the same problem here. The problem that we have that the prototype doesn't have is that electricity is running through the rails to power our locomotives. And we have to keep the rails clean, nice and shiny, so that they make great contact.
So that's the purpose of this transformer right here then?
This little transformer is a test transformer. I can pick it up where you guys can take a look. And this is a little cheap transformer, but it'll put out enough voltage, about 12 to 14 volts, that will power our locomotive up through here. And we'll put what are called feeder wires. There's 2 big wires running through here. There'll be little wires every 3 feet coming off and soldered to the track, so we get good contact all the way up. But right now, we're testing every foot of this as we lay it to make sure that our little tweetsies are going to stay where we want them to and not down on the floor.
Sure.
This is it's called a switch or a turnout. And if I was coming this way, my wheels would get right on there and they would take me right down through here. And with this gap open right here, the other wheel would stay right there. So it's going to divert me or switch me, turn me out into this. If I have a little motor on this, which I will have, and put it to this side, now the wheel catches here and follows this track down through here, and the gap is on this side, so this becomes my stock rail. And both wheels will stay here. So it's a way of getting you from one side to the other with these points moving back and forth.
Cool. So we've moved out of Hampton and we're going into the Doe River Gorge area, and you were saying that there's a camp that's going to be built in this area. What can you tell us about the camp?
Now, Rachel, you're exactly right. We're moving on south along the railroad, and the Doe River Gorge is a famous place along this railroad, and lots of folks that never rode the train will know Doe River Gorge because now there's a Christian ministries camp there that has lots of assemblies and lots of summer programs and others. But if you go there, occasionally there's still little train rides over about 3 miles of the old Tweetsy track. So I know a lot of folks will know where that is, just on the south side of Hampton. So right here, we're entering the gorge. We'll enter a tunnel, which is from my right hand to my left hand. That's tunnel number 2. And it's just a dark hole in the wall. No lining, it's just cut in the rock using black powder and picks and shovels. That's the way they built this railroad. But the tunnel's still there, and a lot of visitors have walked through that tunnel and walked the railroad track probably for a couple of miles. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take a little walk from tunnel number 2 along the track, which now you can imagine with lots of mountain scenery, rhododendron, laurels along the side of it, and lots of forest. And we're going to get to our 3rd tunnel. There are only 5 tunnels on the whole railroad, and we've already come through 3 of them. And we're going to swing around, and now you can begin to hear the rush of the Doe River. Hear that sound? Of course.
Yes.
All right. And we're going to swing around here and go to Party Point. All right, we're on a little journey, and we're coming around this sharp turn. And sitting right here on this side, there'll be a jagged little rock with 2 pine trees on it. You can see those pine trees today. And it's going to take us to the most photographed area on the whole railroad. This area has a mountainside going straight up and even hanging over the rails. And it's a famous place named after the builder of the railroad, a fellow named Pardee. And it's called Party Point. And if your feet sort of feel wet right now, we're standing in the Doe River. It's this big gorge down here below us. So we're going to scenic this so that there's a real drop off. They made retaining walls along the side. It was so steep to keep the track from the roadbed from eroding down into here. We've got this nice big bluff overhead, and they had a nice scene looking down in the river, so that for years the trains would stop, especially the excursions that they would run on special events, and everybody in their Sunday best would have their pictures made along here in Party Point. So we can find lots of historical photographs that show us what this looked like, and we're going to try to duplicate it. If there's one place on the railroad that has to look right, this is going to be it. One thing that you'll notice is that there's hardly any place where the track is straight. They were following a winding course that the river had cut, and they were using that to their best advantage, where they didn't have to move very much material. And so our little track is curving right along, just as they did. We're climbing now, when we got to Hampton, we left the level areas. And so slowly we're climbing. This railroad went over 3,000 feet. At one time, it was one of the highest railroads in North America. We won't quite do that here. The ceiling's too low. But we come up here and we make a nice sweeping turn, and we get to Truss Deck Bridge number 2. We had a wooden deck bridge way over there before we got to Hampton. And this says it was 147 feet long. And that means that all the steel is going to be underneath and the train's going to go over the top of the bridge rather than through the bridge. And just as the Tweetsie did, we'll come out into a tunnel. It's 151 feet long, tunnel number 4, and right back onto a bridge. But this one, the bridge will be up above the track and the track will go through, sort of like a highway bridge does. And we've got some nice pictures of both of those. And then that's going to bring us on back around and down toward tunnel number 5, which is way down there in the curve. One thing that's evident while we're standing here is that the railroad's a lot lower over there on that side than it is over here. And this railroad climbed and climbed and climbed, and so our model railroad has to do the same thing. And we've gone uphill and back around, and we're at tunnel number 5 over here, which is the last tunnel, called Sand Tunnel, that eventually collapsed and had to be routed around. So all the tunnels still exist. You can walk the rail line and see it. We've done that. We photographed a lot of it, so we can try to recreate it as we build this model railroad. And you were asking about something over there.
Yes. These blue dividers right over here in the backdrop, what purpose would they serve?
Well, our mountains can't go on forever. And when we go around this little peninsula, we're in a different part of the railroad. So we're going to do something called a view block. These boards will be high enough so that I can't see from this side to who's standing over on the other side. I can't see the scenery on beyond because we were in the mountains. And this will carry pictures of sky and mountains in the background, and in the foreground we'll run our scenery right into it, so that coming down through here, watching the locomotives pull their trains, you'll be in a mountain valley, and you really won't see what's over on the other side. So it'll make the railroad look a lot bigger, but it'll make this gorge look a lot more narrow and mountainous too as we go through.
And these view blocks will be distributed throughout the museum and not just in this particular area, correct?
Exactly so. Every bit of this track, once we leave the Elizabethton area, will have view blocks. So you'll only see one section at a time, the section you're actually walking through. If you're following the train through, it'll be like you're a passenger on the train and you'll see the scenery go by as you walk through it.
So it looks like we're at the last bridge of the gorge right now in Blevins Bridge. What all can you tell us about this?
Well, this is an interesting bridge. It is the last one in the gorge. It's 110 feet long. And the neat thing about it, it's the only bridge that's still in use, but not by the railroad. It has been paved across, and it now leads into a couple of houses. So cars can go across it. You can drive up and go across, pretend you're in a locomotive if you want, and go through the Blevins Bridge. And after we leave that, we get into a series of rock cuts as we go on up, and we're still following along the edge of the river. So we'll pull our little locomotive fairly fast, get to the Blevins siding. They had a little station there and a place where 2 trains could pass. One could stop and wait for the other. And that's what we built right here. And as we go on up, we make this nice big curve, and we're at a place called White Rock. And White Rock, we fudged a little bit. It should just be a track going here and stopping. But we want to get all the way back over to that highest elevation that we left on our imaginary part of the railroad. So we built a ramp starting here that we're going to hide. And this track will run all the way around and end up back over by Elizabethton, a long way away. But don't tell anybody we're cheating, okay? We're at a place called Crabtree on the line at this point. And Crabtree had a spur. They had a little freight house. So this is a place where they would back 2 or 3 empty cars in, or maybe they're bringing loads up with some things to be distributed to the locals here. And those cars would stay for a while and either be loaded or unloaded, or perhaps a load taken off and another load put back on. And the main line goes in behind it in the little loop. And that will take us on up to the next bigger town that's on our way, and that's the town of Roan Mountain. And that's what's going to sit right here. We don't have the track down yet, but Roan Mountain had a station sitting right where the highway is running today. And some of the buildings that were there when the Tweetsie was running as late as 1950 are still there. The old drugstore built in the 1800s and some of the other buildings. And we'll try to recreate some of that town here. So you sort of have a feeling that you're in the town of Roan Mountain. And then the train is continuing on south. So we'll go south too. We're still climbing, so notice that the railroad is almost up to our shoulders at this point, so it's still puffing uphill. Across one more bridge called the Ray Bridge as we're getting pretty close to the little town of Shell Creek, which is just on south and east of Roan Mountain. And we cross one last little bridge, which is the Shell Creek Bridge. And the little town of Shell Creek is still there, at least parts of it, and we'll recreate as much of that as we can. It's going to have a siding track as well that will occupy this space here, and we're continuing on toward our destination. We'll run through one more little town, which will be Elk Park. Rachel, we're still heading south and east, and so we've got the little town of Shell Creek in our imagination right here, and now we're getting close to the state line between Tennessee and North Carolina. And if you're riding toward Elk Park today from the town of Roan Mountain, you'll see the big sign that says now you're entering North Carolina. Well, we entered North Carolina at a place called the Fill, where they went through a large gap, first with a wooden trestle, and then later, because as the trestle began to age and get weak, they simply brought car after car after car of dirt and rock and dumped it from the top of the bridge until they eventually filled in the whole valley, and then they went across it. So we're going to have part of that fill right here on State Line Hill. And that'll take us into the little town that still exists today, which is going to be sitting right here, and this is the town of Elk Park. And Elk Park is interesting because when you drive through Elk Park today on the highway, you're driving on the old Tweetsie Railroad, and it's higher than the town. So you see the town sitting down in a little valley. So our railroad's going to come across the top, depot's going to be up here, and the town's going to be sitting down here in this little valley, so that the second story windows are going to be about even with the railroad track. And now we've almost gotten to our destination. And that's this whole wall back here. This railroad was built from Johnson City in the late 1800s, the 1880s and early 1890s, to get to a place called Cranberry, North Carolina. In the mid-19th century, one of the richest deposits of iron that had magnetic qualities, magnetite iron, was discovered. A huge vein, and that's the reason this railroad was built, to bring that iron ore either smeltered here or down to Johnson City, where later they built the Cranberry smelter, and get it out to the outside world. And that is going to occupy this whole area here. And once again, we're level. We've stopped our climb. The railroad's coming in on the top level, and the town and the mine sit down here lower. So we'll come down to a station that's going to sit way down here, even though the railroad comes in up there. And we looked at a cardboard station house before, an engine house. And back here behind you, you've got another one. It was a 3-stalled engine house at Cranberry. And this one is the size that we want to make it, and it's sitting right where it's supposed to be. And Cranberry, at least the schematic of Cranberry, looks like this. So these 3 tracks down here are these 3. This is our station sitting down here. All the mine buildings are going to sit on this level, and here's our little 3-stall engine house is sitting over there. And the track going out right by your thumb is going to go on to Newland and eventually to the town of Boone. But not in our lifetime in this railroad. Well, we started our journey down there where your left hand is. So that's Johnson City. And if we follow that up to where the orange line is, the orange line becomes our Tweetsie track. And we come across and down where I'm standing, down this loop, and you can see we started at the coal chute. It's on the south side of Elizabethton. We drive down to the Valley Forge Bridge. We visited that. We get eventually to the tunnel and the covered bridge as we come back. where my thumb is up here, we're going around from Tunnel 3 into Party Point, and we took our little walk. Got that? Took our little walk along Party Point, our curved track. Here's our truss bridge that's a deck bridge, our Tunnel 4, and the next bridge, which is a through truss bridge, and on around Crabtree and eventually around to Blevins and up to the town of Roan Mountain, and on around the next peninsula to Shell Creek. Elk Park is right up here, and what's not on the map is Cranberry. But this is the schematic that this model railroad was being built from. The green lines indicate where there are view blocks so that you can't see across, and we've talked about the view blocks before. You can see them extending on out. So a visitor here following the trains will walk over 200 feet, but that's representing 33 miles of track.